states can actually assign value to different ranks and statuses in society. Also, everything seems to be, in a state-level society, seems to be divided into different tasks. That you know what your task is, you participate as like a cog in a mechanism. And one of those is judiciary. So, whereas charismatic leaders, a village big man or a head of a village, would tend to resolve disputes amongst in tribal societies or in bands. You would find some sort of socially acceptable way to deal with a resolution of a problem issue between a couple of people. This would be done ad hoc. It would be done to this specific case. Whereas in a state-level society, the rules of behavior, the rules of your activity are much more formalized and are administered by a clear judiciary group. So state-level societies have laws that are based on precedent, legislative proclamations, and it can even intervene in your own family affairs. And so your family doesn't have the ultimate right over their own behavior. You still exist in this state-level society. And this, of course, can then be enforced by another specialized division of labor, which is to control internal conflicts, but also external conflicts, things like military. And this is also designed to facilitate things like economic activities. And all of this functions, all of this state-level society stays together because taxation is occurring. And so there's also a very formalized system of drawing taxes through various forms out of the population and then feed that into this divided labor force. And so everybody gets an appointed amount from this redistributed economy. Now, we've talked about means of production in the last chapter, and now we're talking about mode of production. But why would anybody give up their rights? Egalitarianism and being in a band where you could actually have direct access to your own food sources, doesn't that seem like a lot simpler, a lot fairer? Well, it probably is. But all types of political organizations have some means of justifying their existence. And this is that third level that Marx talked about called ideology, or we later referred to as the superstructure. And this is what Antonio Gramsci calls hegemony. And Pierre Bourdieu in the 70s talked about how every social order tries to make its own arbitrariness seem natural. And so we saw this in the origins of state-level society when I talked about the Uruk vase that has an actual depiction of what society is like. That this is natural and normal, with waters of chaos being the very foundation, and then you have plants and animals and slaves and the farmers and the warriors and the nobles and the king and then the gods. And that is the normal and right thing. That is how hegemony hangs together. And so you can see that some of the things that we're going to talk about in later chapters help cultures to cohese, how they actually keep together through symbols of hegemonic control. And so these political systems don't just completely fly apart because the participants believe in them. They think that they're right and proper and correct and natural. And so symbolic behavior becomes extremely important. And so this takes us back to some of our theory. But we're also going to see things like artwork. So when we come to the chapter on art, and we've talked about language, language helps you communicate these things. So all of these other cultural factors come together to tie these social orders together, whatever social order is in place. That doesn't mean that you have to accept it, though. And communities can fly apart. They can resist politics. And you don't have to be powerful in order to resist. And this is where James Scott in the 1990s talks about the difference between public transcripts and hidden transcripts. That is to say, there's particular behavior in public where you follow the rules and you are adhere to social norms and you play by the rule book. But then there's a hidden transcript which refers to the critique of power that goes off stage, that takes place out of where the people in dominating power can see it. And we'll look at some of these weapons of the weak later on, especially when we come to things like art. Art is something that anybody can do, and it doesn't even need to be particularly good art for it to be devastating to political structures. So these are some of the things that take place behind the scenes, and you can have multiple layers of activities taking place even under the most authoritarian and hierarchical systems. Okay, that's it for this chapter then.